Hi everyone, this is Anders Ibsen with Windermere Professional Partners, managing broker of Anders Ibsen Homes. It's great to hear from you. I'm here with my good friend Mark Millsness from Spinnaker Property Management. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, we're here to talk about investor issues that are near and dear to your heart, like how to comply with the rules. But first, a little bit more information about my friend. Mark, tell me more about your operation, how many doors you manage.
Yeah, so Spinnaker Property Management, we are operating right out of Tacoma, and currently we manage over 800 homes, single families, multifamilies, and smaller multifamilies up to 75 homes.
And you yourself are also an investor, right?
Absolutely, yes.
How many doors do you own?
About 56, well, exactly 56.
56, all right, 56 and a half, maybe a doghouse.
Yeah.
Very good.
I've been there before, yes.
Okay, cool. So before we get started talking about the rules, let's talk a little bit more about the market. So we're going to start with a pop quiz.
Oh.
So current average rent for a Tacoma one-bedroom apartment or two-bedroom apartment?
Average rents for one bedrooms right now are about $1,250 for a one bedroom and about $1,375 for a two bedroom.
And that's the city average, so
Correct.
north end versus south end, that's probably what, a couple $100 difference or so?
They'll swing either way, and that's a one bath also.
Sure.
Yeah.
How much is a bathroom at, out of curiosity, to rent?
It depends. Typically there's always going to be a one bath with a one bedroom, but sometimes a two bedroom can have a half bath, or maybe two bedrooms with an ensuite bath and a shared common. Typically three bedrooms offer more than one, but extra baths create an opportunity for more occupancy.
Okay.
So the value could increase significantly because of that bath.
So how do those current numbers compare to last year?
So last year, as our homes came available to the market, they were probably right around the one bedrooms, one baths were probably right around 11, just breaking over the 1,100 mark. And our two bedrooms were just breaking over the 1,200 mark. So it's significant. On average, our rents over the last year as they came to market were somewhere between 16 and 22% increase in value.
And what do you attribute that change to?
Lack of inventory, migration, and people have money. There's a lot of money that's in the market right now, or in people's pockets and bank accounts, that they're willing to spend to have quality homes.
Now, some people are attributing a lot of the increases, not just in rent, but to value in the South Sound area compared to, say, northern King County, to work from home. Because if you can work some or all of your work week just from your dining room or closer by at least, and avoid an I-5 commute and avoid higher cost of living, then that has drawn more people towards suburbs and secondary cities like Tacoma. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The migration into the Puget Sound area has been strong, and it even compounds down into the secondary markets like Pierce County, where people can remote work or commute less frequently, and they get more for their buck.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So talking more about recent developments in the market, it's first quarter 2022, and it's been 2 years, and we're still in a pandemic.
Yep.
And believe it or not, pandemics are really bad for renters. A lot of people have struggled. There's been everything from mass unemployment, health problems, shutdowns, and as a result of the real hardship people have been suffering through, local and eventually the state government stepped in with some new rules on landlord-tenant law, revisions to the landlord-tenant law code. And these have mostly pertained to things like evictions, whether and when evictions can happen, raising rent, procedures for giving notification, etc. So Mark, of those new changes to come from the legislature, what are the biggest ones that landlords should be aware of?
Well, it's not that to come, they're already here. So what's interesting is earlier in 2021, the laws were voted and put into place. However, they were suppressed by the moratorium. Once the moratorium expired in September, the laws now became effective, which were actually, in some cases, more restrictive than the moratorium. So now if there's 16, to give somebody notice to move, you have to have 16 just causes, or one of the 16 just causes.
If they're month to month.
Or if they're month to month. If they're on a lease term, then at the end of their lease term, you have to give them proper notice. If they roll to month, then the new laws affected that. And then they also continue to affect. So it gets complicated. However, for the most part, owner-operators of small portfolios will probably find themselves confronted with, how do I legally give notice with one of these 16 just causes? And they can range from 20 days to 60 days to 90 days to 120 days with some relocation costs. So it's a lot to know. And in addition to that, if we're having a conversation about notice to pay or vacate, there's a whole new process for people who are in arrears with rents that added about another 20 days to the process if you have to go through the court system to have an eviction. So,
is there a right to counsel? I'd heard that that was also part
yes.
of the process.
Yeah, there is a right to counsel. There's a whole new program in the state and in the counties that landlords are required to, at time of serving notice, to share that notice and payment plan option with that agency, which is free counsel, and then go to mediation prior to contacting and setting court dates. And it's a very rigorous and lots of document process.
Now, the law is all well and good, but generally speaking, competent management and just having a good relationship with your renters, that's worth its weight in gold, and probably a lot more long-term benefits to both the landlord and the renter than just knowing the law and being poised to evict at the slightest inconvenience.
Correct.
Right?
Communication's the number one thing. You know, it's what I think is the access to great relationships in every aspects of our lives, and especially in the industry of where it's really personal about someone's home, especially if it's a family. Being in communication and then working with a professional management company, knowing how the laws work and how to navigate through the laws, and being in communication to work with the occupants to share the options that they don't know. So that sets it up for success.
Now, as an aside, you mentioned the word family. That's a very important aside, and that is fair housing. So,
oh boy, yeah.
Such a huge landmine for people who choose not to hire managers who are schooled in the policies and know what they're doing. What would you say are some of the biggest landmines for those who don't have competent managers that they'd hire to look after their properties? What would you say, in your experience, are the biggest landmines for self-managing landlords to avoid when it comes to fair housing so they can comply with the law?
The number one thing is we work with clients that were owner-operators, and we work with clients that are professional investors, right? They have their future set up, and almost every single time it's personal. That's my house, I pay the mortgage on it, I have my rights, and that's true. However, when somebody is in the home renting it, they have their rights also that suppress the owner rights unless they go through the legal process.
As a leasehold interest.
Yeah, so in the conversation of being in communication, sometimes housing providers, which are landlords, say things or take action or do things that seem appropriate because they own the land and the house, which are still illegal. And we're here to help people stay out of trouble, not get them out of trouble.
Sure.
Yeah.
So back to just cause. You mentioned 16 potential causes. What are some of the biggest, most recognizable examples?
Non-payment.
Sure.
Non-compliance, something other than rent. They're loud noise, disturbing the other occupants, parking, unauthorized pets, unauthorized occupants, maybe smoking in a home that has a no smoking policy. The other ones are when the owner or the housing provider wants to sell the house or to move into the house. So there's a process to go through that. And then, which is really big right now, to where investors are buying real estate to fix up and then remarket, that's considered a new use.
Right.
And that could be 120 days notice.
Yeah, with at least in Tacoma, it's $1,000 from the landlord, and the city has to match it.
Correct, for relocation
For
costs.
relocation,
Yep,
no.
yeah, so, and that's just 5 of the 16.
So mostly it's money, renovation, occupancy, rule
Compliance.
violations.
Yep.
So those are the general higher level
Yep.
amounts.
Yeah.
So
And that's where the personal opinions come in and break down the relationship, because the occupant is doing one thing and the owner, housing provider, doesn't like that. And if it's not languaged in the agreement, becomes let's figure it out. If it's in the language of the agreement on how to address each one of those things, which professional management companies have, it clearly sets the path on how to move forward. Yeah.
So these rules have been in effect for over a year now.
Yep.
How have they affected the market in terms of rent, in terms of the price of rental properties for purchase purposes, the supply of available rentals, the supply of available properties for purchase? How, if at all, have these things been affected, in your opinion, in the last year of these new rules being in effect?
The impact isn't necessarily going to increase the rental rates. What that impact has with those restrictive laws and with the constant migration and money in people's pockets, that's the impact to the market rate to sell. So as you and I have witnessed over the last 2 years, the price to purchase a rental investment has increased significantly. Now it's precipitous with the rental rate, so it's fair. And when people are getting uncomfortable with the political environment and the new laws and the strong market to sell, it motivates them to bring their product to the market. And there's a lot of people, like you and myself, willing to look at it, so it drives the price up.
Hence why there are a lot of multifamily listings in the city of Seattle, for
Yes.
example, compared to other locales, because the rules are stricter.
Much stricter than what we're even talking about. Yeah, absolutely. So the impact of the last year has driven the price of homes or investments to purchase up, not necessarily the impact on the rental rates.
So I'd heard two competing theories on this, and I'd like your thoughts on this, Mark. So I had heard that inventory might have been scarcer, or it might be scarcer now than it might have been a year ago comparatively, because the rules are strict, but in some respects they're less strict than during the moratorium, because there are some provisions for evicting people who break rules, you can raise rent again, etc.
Correct.
Whereas during the moratorium, which was extended time and time again, you could do neither of those things. And I mean, I saw very scarce market dynamics when I was working with investors last year, but there was some argument that the scarcity might actually increase in availability of product because it's not as hard to be a landlord anymore. What would you say to that?
I think there's some truth in that. I think everybody in every industry was stunned with the shutdown from the impact of COVID.
Yeah.
And then as you saw at the end of 2020, people became bolder. You know, there's more money to work with from that was been pent up. And people started like, you know, maybe I don't want to be in this industry anymore, so they brought their product to the market. And that has tapered off a bit because as a buyer, it's harder for me to even look at or to find things to look at, let alone make offers on.
Yeah.
So, and those rates are coming up and there's more people competing because there's less options to look at or to consider.
Yeah, something I noticed, and I'd like your thoughts on this, is I had seen the gap between different communities in rent shrinking. So the gap historically between Tacoma and Seattle, for example, was pretty high, but I've noticed a real shrinking of rent when I've done rental surveys recently. South King County and Pierce County or Tacoma rents are almost the same, I've noticed. Have you noticed similar numbers?
I haven't quite noticed that.
Okay.
I know that like Pierce County's rental rates have been increasing at double digit on year over year, even in month over month in some cases, where King County has been increasing single digits. So
Okay.
the gap is closing.
It's just the rate of gain that's different.
It's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's still a higher demand and more money in the King County, especially in the metro area.
Is that just renter fatigue, just the market hitting a wall, or is it
I think so.
regulation?
Well, for sure, because multifamily properties in the city of Tacoma are struggling right now because of people willing to migrate out into other areas and get a similar product for maybe a little less.
Yeah.
And maybe newer even. So, and the restrictions have some impact on that also.
Okay, interesting. So, in conclusion, if we're talking about people who aren't necessarily working with a property manager, which is always the smartest choice because you get current up-to-date information on policy, on the numbers, and you get that third party, so you're not getting those 2 a.m. water heater phone calls, which I've never once received. I self-manage one unit, and I have a manager for 8 others.
Believe me, we've gotten your calls that you didn't get.
I'm sure you have, Mark. If you were to give one piece of advice to a landlord who's not represented about just the wisest things they can do to maximize their success while also being cognizant of the spirit and the letter of the law? What would they be?
Well, Spinnaker Property Management, pins our reputation on peace of mind being delivered to all that we work with, whether it's a housing provider, the renter, the contractor, the assistance programs, realtors, our entire sphere. And for housing providers that are doing their owner operating, getting the maximum rent with the best qualified person with the least amount of vacancy is what we specialize in. And it's what we do every single minute of every hour of every day. And when owner-operator housing providers have a career and a family, they don't get the opportunity to dedicate the right time and the knowledge. And in many cases, we get to make our clients more money, and they do a lot less.
And there's a lot less of that whole informal handshake and a wink way of handling landlord-tenant relations.
Yep.
And those are almost always, in my experience, the biggest nightmare scenarios where you run into problems down the road that you couldn't have possibly predicted, right?
Yeah,
Instead
absolutely.
of having a defined process that follows the law.
Just a snapshot in when we're listening to the statistics of our environment, multifamily or rental industry stuff, the stories that we get in the media are not professionals in the industry. They're owner-operating housing providers who are unaware of the laws and the process, who make those mistakes and then cause harm to somebody, and then it hits the media, and that's the stories that we get.
Okay.
So stay out of that.
Indeed. Any parting words of wisdom, Mark?
No, thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed our conversation and look forward to doing more business with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This is Anders Ibsen with Windermere Professional Partners, managing broker with Anders Ibsen Homes, here with Mark Milsness from Spinnaker Property Management. Thank you so much for listening. Keep the questions coming.
Be well.